This tape meeting is a presentation at Access Incorporated, a community action agency committed to helping people help themselves.
Just one thing to add to that, I do know that there has been work to develop an early childhood advisor in the governor's cabinet. I think that's going to happen. That person, whoever gets appointed that position, is going to be vital in terms of trying to at least for the early childhood parts of this, making sure that those ideas get forwarded, those ideas get communicated, and becomes that sort of focal point on getting things done.
Other questions? Julie?
As you're aware, I take care of the Medicaid transportation for 7 counties, and there was a movement amongst DMAP or DHS to do a study over the summer looking at transportation for medical services. And when I read the scope of work that came out of DHS on this study, they didn't ask the right questions. And so they have formed a study that they haven't released yet. We're still trying to get a copy of it. But preliminary talks with them is there's a movement to take all of these brokerages out of the hands of the locals and put it into a one system. And you're talking about moving fast. There's this movement to move fast, and yet it could really, it's going to implicate transportation statewide. Everything that we've worked to coordinate transportation locally in communities to make it more efficient, we're going to lose that. And they're talking about going to a private organization call center that's not even located in the state of Oregon. I'm very concerned. We've had talks with Terry Byer and the transportation community, but I think that you'll probably be hearing from me and from my constituents to have a conversation with Dr. Goldberg, because really the wrong questions were asked, and it's a big concern.
Okay.
I have ways to save money, so.
And that's important. The question is, what about transportation? Because it looks like DHS may be moving in a direction that could do more harm than good. The reality is they're looking at the costs, and the costs are escalating. The revenue is not available, and so something needs to be done. And so if you have ideas that will save costs and make it more productive, those we need to have, because there's going to be change. And it's not going to work for people to come forward and say, don't gore our ox, gore somebody else's, because what we're doing is really important. It's all important. There's just not enough money to keep doing it the way it's been done in the past.
I'm sure you will be in touch. Question back?
He was advised me, maybe I should. What is your interest on the other side of the equation, the revenue side, tax structure, kicker? Can you give kind of a pros and cons of
Sure.
what you guys are looking at?
My question is about on the revenue side of it. You know, I'll do my best to keep Dennis from raising your taxes in the next.
I'll hold him to that.
The reality is politically that it's 30-30 in the House. It takes 36 votes in the House to raise revenue. It's very doubtful that anything significant would happen in terms of revenue. There is discussion of things like a beer tax, beer and wine tax, perhaps if it's dedicated to drug and alcohol rehab and mental health. That might have some traction. We'll have to find out whether people are open for that. We're working under the assumption, and I think you need to, that there will be no additional revenue. We have to work under that assumption. So again, there just does not seem to be the political ability to increase revenue.
And also changing the kicker is a very difficult thing politically to do. I have a bill that may or may not go anywhere, but it's a referral to the people for the people to make a decision as to whether it would be appropriate to put a cap on spending except for emergency situations, where you pick a flat time. Let's say this is our starting point, and then it increases by population or inflation, and then when we come into the next boom cycle where the revenues exceed that, the excess money does not automatically go to the kicker, but goes to the rainy day fund, and would build till you have 25% of the general fund budget in the rainy day fund. If we had a boom period that went beyond that, the excess revenue beyond that 25% would go to pay down Oregon debt, because we spend $500 million of our budget just on debt service. And then when the debt's all paid down, then the kicker would certainly come into play at that point. So we're not eliminating it, we're just kind of delaying it a little bit to utilize that money elsewhere. And so that's an opportunity for the people to say, okay, maybe we can do this, because there's triggers that allow us to exceed the spending limit when it's necessary, but it takes a real bipartisan decision to do that. And it also recognizes the fact that the legislature normally spends whatever it can get. And so it would help limit these increases so we're not feast and feathers like we have had in the past.
Yeah, I actually think this idea, there are several variations of it, and I think it's a good chance of getting traction. The idea being trying to look at the whole political spectrum, and the people who really want to see spending held down would be saying basically population increase, inflation increase. Those are reasonable increases. But once you hit that level, anything above that goes into the rainy day fund. There's some possibilities there. On the one side, people on the more liberal side, they get stability in governance with that rainy day fund and with the kicker going into it. For those who want to see spending capped, they get a version of a cap. So I think there is some traction for that idea, a compromise for that idea. There have been different levels. I think Senator Frank Morris says Dennis wants 25%, which I think is fantastic. Frank Morris has a different kind of trigger thing at 12%, 18%. And he has the corporate kicker going directly to higher education. But again, that would be something you have to refer to the voters. But I do think there'll be referral coming out. There's a good chance that there'll be referral coming out of this session.
You mentioned that in the House there's a 30-30 split. What opportunities do you see that presenting? Do you see that there'll be less rhetoric from each side, or that there'll be more working, there'll be more cooperation?
Questions about the 30-30 split, and will the rhetoric calm down, and will the cooperation increase? That goes back to the question about, I'm telling you guys, move with speed. It took us 2 months and 1 week to figure out how we were going to organize ourselves. So I do understand the difficulty of working with different factions trying to get something together so people feel it's fair. I do think, I'm cautiously optimistic. The fact that we were able to, in a very highly charged political atmosphere, get to a point where Dennis and I are both representing the House on Ways and Means and the Equal Partnership, that gives me some hope. That gives me hope that we're able to do this in a way. We have two people who are the co-speakers of the House, Bruce Hammond from Roseburg and Arnie Rowland from Coos Bay, both very level-headed guys, both very reasonable people, trying their best to maintain a good cooperative model. And I do think there's almost a culture shift that's happening. I know it's happening in my caucus. I think it's happening in Dennis's too, where people who get kind of pounding the table on things, they're kind of looked at as being like, you guys are blowing it. Don't pound the table on something. Quiet down. Let's get to work. So,
and that is the truth. I think that the 30-30 split in the House will help lessen the acrimony, because neither side has the power to do anything extreme. And so it's kind of like in negotiations. If you have a type A and a person who's more passive, type A wins. But when you have two type A's, they become cooperative. And so our two caucuses have become cooperative, and they need to be.
My question is, the programs in this room only represent a part of the expense to the state budget. I was wondering what the state might be doing, looking at itself and the government to reduce expenses within itself, such as maybe like California did with the cell phones, or perhaps looking at the state motor pool and all the cars parked there that are not being utilized every day. Maybe you could do car rentals. I don't know.
Absolutely. The question was about, is state government looking to cut itself as well as the cuts that happen everywhere else? You want to give a shot at that one?
Yeah. The answer is everything is going to be on the table. The challenge is reform is often discussed but rarely implemented. You know how hard it is, because as soon as you start seriously talking about some type of reform, those that are going to be adversely affected call their constituents and they say, we're going to lose our funding. Call your representative and tell them to talk to Representative Richardson and Representative Buckley and tell them not to cut our program. And so it's called rally the troops and then get political pressure so that you don't end up having to bring about any kind of reform. All we can promise, what we're promising our caucus members, is we will do everything that we can to share the pain so that it doesn't focus on one part of the state or one person's district, but nobody's going to escape it. And we want suggestions on how to do things better with less.
and we are cutting. We're cutting wherever we can. We've cut our own budget, legislature. In fact, we have to vote on that in February to officially cut our budget. We've gone ahead and already cut our legislature's budget. The first meeting where Governor Kitzhaber came to our caucus, I think I probably started off on a bad foot when he said that he was having trouble with the cutback of positions in the governor's office. He wanted to get add one or two more, and I said no. And so that was my first request from the governor, denied. And I'm back, but I knew I had Dennis's backing on that. I didn't hesitate to say no. But we are okay. And some agencies are better than others. I got to say, as you go through the process, you have people that come forward and they're sweating bullets trying to figure out how to do more with less, and they are coming forward with very active changes. The one area that I think we have to go through is things like carpools. Department of Administrative Services is grown in many ways, and in a lot of ways, the shell game in the budget, because they basically can say, well, this isn't general fund money that they're spending. No, they're spending other agencies' general fund money. Basically, when they charge for services, when DAS charge for services, it comes in the budget as other funds. But basically, what they're doing is they're getting payments from one agency for DAS services, and we've been struggling mightily to try to figure out how to hold down DAS's costs so that other agencies aren't funneling more general fund money to the Department of Administrative Services. That's an area we've got to keep focusing on. The Chief Justice has done an incredibly good job, in my view, with the court system, trying to look for ways to reduce expenditures, but not cutting drug courts out, not cutting family courts out. He's working tremendously hard trying to figure out how to get that done. So they're doing things now like, they're closed during lunch hours. The courts are closed during lunch hours in some places. Or they've reduced, some of them are closed Friday mornings in some areas of the state. We're trying to figure out how to do it. And again, as I think we both said, everything is on the table. When ideas come forward, when someone shows that there's waste in it, there's a lot of fury when waste is brought forward, because we're all trying so hard to hold things together.
One thing that's important is we need to learn how to incentivize being economical. We should not be punishing agencies for cutting back on their expenditures by saying, oh, great job, that's all you get in the future. And it's difficult to do this because people in the system understand how to game the system. So other states have said, well, we'll give a financial bonus. And so then what they have to deal with is padding the budget so that they can then cut and get a financial bonus. And so there's always ways to kind of game it, but we're looking for how do we help agencies that are working the best and being economical and efficient and effective to be benefited from that and not kind of, no good deed goes unpunished. That's not the philosophy of law.
One more question?
On that note, Representative Richardson, you and I were on the heels of David Osborne when we were at the business summit. And I remember we were talking about implementing his practices and where the governor was at with that. I was wondering, did you have an update on, given both the Ways and Means positions you looked at as well as the conversation you had with the governor about any of that? I thought that was a very intriguing model that got presented at that summit about how you create that kind of incentivized system.
In Portland a few weeks ago there was a summit, and they have periodically a business summit, and they brought in a man named David Osborne, who is an authority, written books on how you can fund government more effectively, and he gave a great presentation and basically showed that, said throughout all of the various states and all the way down to your local cities, people have kind of a point where they're not going to pay anymore. And they said in Oregon it's about 10% taxes and 5% lottery. He said you can go back through all the budgets and look at this, and this is what it comes out with. So that's the amount of money that you're going to be able to spend, and so just face it. And so how do you go about doing that? How do you become a priority-based spending unit rather than a current service level based? And said these are the challenges. Governor Kitzhaber said that he has an office that is unfilled at this point for an efficiency expert. They want to bring someone in for a period of time, not a permanent position, but somebody who's real knowledgeable about what works and what doesn't work to help Oregon. And so we've asked for David Osborne to come and give a presentation to the leadership, including the governor, because he has such great ideas about what's working in Wisconsin and in New Jersey, but it's not working elsewhere. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.